Hello, everyone, and thanks for listening. So, you see this picture here of these two women? I know you're thinking, wow, we don't have a clue as to who these women are. Well, I'm going to kind of introduce you to who these two women are. So, to the left is Margie Carter, and to the right, with the short cropped hair, is Debbie Curtis. And so, these two women are responsible for writing numerous books or working on numerous projects, books. A lot of what we know today that have been implemented in the preschool settings all over, and it is entitled Creative Curriculum. And the reason I'm doing this video is because I don't think enough people who have been in that field come out and talk about some of the problems that they have with this type of learning for kids of that age. And I believe usually they work with, they start with infants on up to toddler age. And I think it's mainly in the preschool settings that I've known for most of the time that I've recognized this to be so. And so there's numerous books. I know you see aligned, there's all these books that they're responsible for basically using as tools. These books are used as tools of what people will read to try to learn how to instruct children in classroom settings. I feel as though these two women have made more money on books. And mostly all these books you'll see it say either Debbie Curtis, Margie Carter, or Margie Carter, or Debbie Curtis. The Art of Awareness. They have a lot of books. I mean, every book that you see that I'm showing here, they've had a hand in it. And it goes on and on and on. And so here they are pictured here again. And so I'm just going to be honest. Creative curriculum doesn't work for everyone. Maybe there was a time that it worked, and it worked for some people, and it worked for some classrooms, but every kid does not learn effectively with that type of curriculum style. And so these two women have worked on many teaching tool books that instruct people on how to implement creative curriculum, which is a type of style, or actually not a style, a type of way to implement learning in a preschool setting for kids that are infants and toddlers, and I think it goes up to about age 5 or 6 years old. And so they even have a section here called Author Spotlight in Red Leaf Press, because they probably had a lot of different, you see, you get like a little background. What are you both doing these days? People that have had like interviews with these two women, and they've asked them questions, and they pretty much are like looked at as the guru of preschool all over the U.S. And there may be some other people who have implemented their styles of teaching. I know there's other styles other than the creative curriculum, but the creative curriculum seems to be the most widely used form of early childhood technique that has been used, especially in schools that are federally funded through the government a lot of those schools are for like low income. And a lot of what has happened that has made it seem like a disaster is it's hard to get people to work in those classrooms. And I'm going to explain to you why. The money, number one. People who work in the field of working with children that are infants and toddlers, if they're not working in an administrative portion of it, if they're not owning the school, if they're just a teacher or a TA, they don't make that much income. And that has been an ongoing problem with that particular profession. It seemed like in the 90s, I say like maybe the early to mid 90s, that was like a big career move for young women and young males if they were interested. Mainly, what dominates that field is young women were interested in having a career where you go to a vocational college to start with, and after 2 years you could actually be working in the field of preschool teaching. And it seemed like it was the thing to do in the 90s. And now we're in 2020 and beyond, and the rents have risen. The cost of living has risen, and the income in that particular field has not kept up with what has gone on in today's world. And so that has become a huge problem in that arena. A lot has been talked about in like secondary schools and maybe high schools where teachers are not getting paid. But what about these preschools? And so I'm going to lay out some scenarios or some things that actually have happened in some of these settings, because people, I don't think, really realize what goes on in these type of settings, because a lot of times they view these types of schools as babysitting centers. They don't know that there's actual teachers that have went to college and they've taken units, or they have to have certain requirements met to actually be in the classroom setting when they're in preschool. In that arena, when they're in the preschool setting, they have to have certain units, they have to have, certain medical clearances to be in those classrooms. And so they also have to know the expertise, or have their own bit of expertise in how to manage a classroom, how to write lesson plans, how to actually implement what I mentioned earlier back when I was talking about these two women, creative curriculum in those classrooms. But oftentimes what happens to the teachers that work in these classroom settings, they are treated more like they're alienated, like that they're not really that important in terms of the work world. It's more like a school for babysitters. And they're just, a school where they do, teach the basics, change diapers, but there's several practices, there's procedures that have to come along with changing diapers even, and people are not aware of that. It's not just changing a kid's diaper. You have to have a certain ratio of teachers that are in a classroom to students that are in the classroom. And you can't have more students and less staff, and you can't have less staff and more students, and you have to have all eyes watching the kids at all times, and there has to be someone else to replace a teacher if they have to go on a break, or if they have to go on a lunch, or if they're absent for the day. And so there's a lot more involved. Even beyond that, there are a lot of papers that have to be filled out because they're receiving grant money from the government to fund these schools. Some schools are nonprofit, some schools are private, some schools are, most of the times, they're federally funded through the government, and you have to account for where all the money is being used, from the food to the furniture, the toys that are in the classroom, the books, the tools that are being used for the teachers to have access so they can write their lesson plan and implement that, what we call creative curriculum, in those rooms with the numbers of kids that they're serving. And a lot of times the kids come from low-income neighborhoods, where, they might be in a situation where they qualify as at risk for a number of reasons, and a lot of times those schools are centralized in neighborhoods like where people are living below or at the poverty level. And there was once where First Five had gotten involved. I don't know if that's still happening. It may be, but there's certain programs that will get tax write-offs, or organizations rather, that get tax write-offs if they donate to schools, or they help with the school getting furniture for the classroom, toys for the classroom, supplies for the classroom for a preschool setting. And so usually a lot of the things end up coming from an organization, and I'm going to show you that organization because I was looking at other stuff earlier. So I don't know if anybody is aware of this organization, but this organization, hopefully I got the right one, because nope, that's not the one. Okay, so that's not the one. Let's see. Now, this may not be correct, but it might lead me to where I'm looking for the correct. Because I was just on it the other day. Okay, I think I found it. Okay. Yep, I found it. And so it's called Los Angeles County Office of Education. And so it is abbreviated and called LACO. And a lot of times, a lot of those people that come from this place will come and they will make visits to these schools. And what they do is when they come to the schools, the preschools, they're trying to see and make sure that the schools are actually implementing the curriculum, that they're following the rules, that the building's up to code, they'll send different people out to observe different things about the schools. And so this is all over, but in particular, but a lot of times the money and the grant money, a school has to, you know, be accredited and be approved. And with preschools, they have to have the correct staff. And by me saying the correct staff, all the staff has to have all of the things that they require in order to be in the school to actually work with the kids. And if they don't, then they have to, that person, they check all the files, they check to see if everything's up to date, permits or the units or that even down to like if the person employee is vaccinated, has their TB or has their, CPR certification. And, you have to basically have everything that you're supposed to have. But they're having trouble with a lot of these preschools because a lot of teachers do not want to teach there because of the morale of the classrooms, because the paperwork is very lengthy. There's a lot of paperwork. You have to account for what kids have eaten. You have to account for what kids are absent, what kids are there at the school that day, each week. You have to account for, make notes if for a lot of different things you wouldn't believe. The kids' goals, you have to make sure that all of those things have been planned, and you have to make sure that you have those things documented. You also have to rate the kids on a rating scale to see where their strengths and weaknesses are. There's a lot of things that people don't realize that go on in these preschools that they think are babysitting centers. It's a lot more involved in these schools than you know. There's paperwork that you wouldn't believe that has to be filled out, and if it's not filled out at a particular time, there's deadlines that you have to meet. Then it slows everyone up, or it sets you back and you have to start over again. There's like a computerized log where you're documenting kids' strengths and weaknesses, or the things that they've achieved, their milestones. And you are basically going in and it used to be you had to write it out and put it on a hard copy of form. But now you can enter it in a computerized form, and you can save it, and then once the people who are interested in it get it, and I would believe it's LACO, this organization here, they know all your kids in the classroom, they know that you've been rating them, they know what the kids' goals were, and what they came in with and what they left with, and it's to prepare the kids so that they're ready for Head Start and then eventually ready to move on to secondary school. And so what ends up happening is the teacher morale in some of these schools are not that great. You have some teachers that are not able to work with other teachers or other instructors. You have people who are really there for the money, and so they move up really quick, and you don't know from out of nowhere how that happened, but they tend to be more, rather than looking at it as trying to help as a team, they become more authoritative and competitive rather than working as a unit and helping one another, because you're all in the same predicament. You're having to turn in things, and you're having to account to somebody and report to somebody somewhere. Even if you're a site supervisor, you have a boss over you, Some people are pulled out of the classroom and into the administrative portion and make a little more money, but there's a lot more stress involved with that. And so if the school is not running properly, then it's a reflection on the site supervisor. But a lot of these schools don't have a lot of teachers that want to stay because of pay and because of all of the paperwork that they are responsible for filling out, which it seems like every year they come up with new paperwork for people to have to fill out. But every year, your pay never really increases. And so that's been an ongoing problem. And that is the reason why it's hard to keep teachers in these classrooms. And then when people do commit to the classrooms, they're not happy. They're overworked, underpaid, and underappreciated, and dealing with a lot of stress. And because of the cost of living, a lot of these teachers, sometimes they will have a number of years that they stay in the profession, but then they'll take up a second job, or they'll moonlight, or they'll try to do something else to make ends meet. So it really is not as great as these two women try to make it seem. It may be great for them because they've made a lot of money off of the books and this creative curriculum theory, and they've made a lot of money over the years basically watching everybody else do what, every now and then, I've seen little articles where they say they've actually been in the classroom and they've been with kids. But I feel as though they haven't really gone through the struggles of what some of these young teachers today are dealing with. I don't know if it was anything like that back in that time, if it was any worse, or if it's about the same. But what I've known is not a lot of teachers are happy. And that's in any grade. It seems like for some reason teachers are underappreciated, underpaid, and overworked. And they're required to fill out a lot of paperwork, and it more than likely it takes the desire to want to teach away from a person who, like, when you might have started out, like I said, in the mid 90s, teaching was the thing to do, and it was like a big field, and it was supposed to be popularized. And this creative curriculum, you could get a job and you could have an honest living and you could make a little money, and it seemed like the thing to do. But what they didn't realize is that with these schools, they're working with a population where it's low income, and everything is low income. Even your pay is low income. And the teachers are suffering. The preschool teachers are suffering at a lot of these schools. I've noticed that, in my years of observing this, it hasn't really gotten any better. And I notice most of the schools are experiencing this. There's a shortage of preschool teachers, and that's not by accident. It's not because people just hate teaching. There are some people who are not really kid friendly. They're not meant to be in a classroom listening to kids, running around and bustling, and and then redirecting kids all day. And then you have to be a person that's able to listen to the cries and the yells and the screams and the excitement and the bustling of toys and whatnot. Some people are not cut out for that. But if you are cut out for that, you have the other issues that are attached to those professions is all the paperwork that they require you to do and turn in. They want you to monitor the kids. They want you to change the kids. They want you to watch the kids, supervise the kids, and then they want you to do the paperwork, find time to do paperwork, which that is a big problem for a lot of teachers. They don't have a lot of time because they're busy spending all their times trying to do classroom maintenance and also supervise the children, and they're trying to keep some of the things organized in the classroom and make sure that the kids are safe. And so it's harder to do that and then try to find an hour or 2 hours to sit and do paperwork. A lot of times they're instructed not to take papers home because, it's like taking your work home and you're not going to get paid for it. But you find some teachers end up having to take things home because they don't have a lot of time in their classroom day to actually do paperwork. And they're supposed to give like teachers an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours or a day or so to try and work on paperwork, but you never have time to finish everything. And so that takes the fun, the desire out of teaching because you're focused on turning in papers and completing paperwork, and you're worried and stressed about not having things turned in rather than, how are the kids doing? Is it fun in the classroom? Had you seen Jimmy, eat with a spoon? And the thing is that every second that you see your kids, you have to observe things that they're doing. It's not because you want to see them succeed and you want to have fun watching them grow. No, it's because paperwork says that you have to observe certain things that kids do. So you feel like you're observing the kids from afar, but you have to also be engaged with them at the same time. And it's harder because you're in the back of your mind, you're worried about paperwork. And so I believe that's why creative curriculum is not fun. Because if you look at all the papers that some of these teachers have to fill out in these preschools, you'll understand why a lot of them are not happy and why a lot of people will not want to teach for more than 5 years. And then the ones that have taught for longer or been in classrooms, they stay being assistants because there's certain levels to being before you actually get permitted to be a teacher in the preschool setting. So before you get to that point, you might have to take more classes, or you might have to take up the profession of actually being titled teacher 1, teacher 2, whatever the school has for a teacher. Some schools are like everybody's a teacher, but most times they'll have like one teacher, maybe 2 assistants, or 1 teacher and 1 assistant. And so assistant may not be as strapped with paperwork as the actual teacher is. So a lot of times people will take an assistant job, but that means you're going to get lower pay. So some people will take the teaching job because it's higher pay, but then when they see all the paperwork they have to fill out and what they have to include with being that teacher 1 or teacher 2 or master teacher, it's a turnoff. And so these 2 women here, over years and years, have made a lot of money. They've spent a lot of time in this concept called creative curriculum, yet I don't think they realize what has happened with all of that. 2, I've heard complaints about that particular theory that these 2 women have created, is that the kids, they basically, what creative curriculum, what I've seen it to be in these classrooms, is that they have the classroom set up where they have an art area, they have an area where they have blocks, they have areas where they have kids to explore with science material, they have the room kind of sectioned off with different interest areas that the kids can go to. And so that seems all well and good, but what happens is the kids are not as structured in these classrooms. There's structure in the classroom, but the kid has the wherewithal to do what they want, basically explore the classroom. And that is what creative curriculum's supposed to be entail. And by the kid exploring the classroom, they're learning through their exploration. Some of that may be good, but all of it doesn't end up always being good. So there's kids from different backgrounds. They're from different maybe countries, different languages. They're coming in from different walks of life. And they may get their training, their first training comes from home. Some kids are not being trained. Some kids are not being worked with because it could be for a number of reasons. And so whatever that kid comes in the classroom with is what you're working with to try to help them to explore. So you have to know how to redirect children if they don't get along with other children in social settings. You have to also help children to learn, how to socialize with other kids if they're coming from a place where there's different language. So they're exploring a lot of avenues. And so the thing is sometimes it works and other times it doesn't always work effectively. And what ends up happening a lot of times is teachers are turned off because there is a schedule that the teacher follows throughout the day. Some kids are able to deal with a classroom setting like that, and others may not be. And depending on the culture or what their upbringing is, that could be an indicator of how they do in that classroom. And so with all of that being said and done, sometimes kids will come really ill. The parents will give them medicine, and by the middle of the day, the kid's full of snot, almost passed out because they have like a sickness. You'll have signs up all over the door before kids enter the classroom about the transfer of diseases or sicknesses and illnesses, because the school and the teachers are underappreciated and the school is looked at as a babysitting center. A lot of times those kids end up coming even when they're sick, and then the other kids get sick, the teachers get sick, and then you have to call a day or two out because you're ill with something. The other thing is you have low-income parents. Some parents that are working may not make a lot of money, and they may have a boss that puts pressure on them not to be absent. That has been the running excuse, but that isn't always the case. Some parents aren't working. They just don't want their time, 2 hours, 3 hours, or whatever their day taken away from whatever it is that they're not doing. If it's watching TV or going out with a friend, they don't want to have to deal with having a kid at home or having to take them to the doctor. And so I've seen this happen on multiple occasions where, the kid is sick and they refuse to take the kid to the doctor until they finally have no other alternative but to take them to the doctor because they passed on their cold or their flu to the teacher and to the other children. And so a lot of this happens in these preschools, and this is what preschool teachers, this is what preschool setting is like, among a lot of other problems that go on. Some kids will come to school sporadically. They'll come to school really late. If there is a routine, the routine is off because they're not consistent with bringing the kids. There's a lot of different things that happen in these classrooms, and the teacher, at the end of the day, she's not really getting paid what she's worth. And I mean, I'm not just talking about the lead teacher, I'm talking about all the teachers, from the lead to the assistant on down to whoever is in that classroom managing it. Mostly the people who get paid the most are the people who are the site supervisors and people who do administrative work where they're in the office and they're not really in the classroom. And they usually are the ones that tell others that are in the classroom having to bear the brunt of all of the frustrations of trying to manage the classroom, the kids, supervise kids, and then complete paperwork within the whole day or have it done before the end of Friday. Because a lot of times paperwork is due Monday or it's due Friday or however the school has their staff do things and turn things in. You have deadlines and, they give you dates, but, you have intentions to do things. You know how you have intentions to do things and turn things in? You do, but a lot of times you don't have the time because you're busy concerned with the kids' well-being and welfare. Because if you take your eyes off the kids, they could get hurt. You could be responsible for that. If the kids hurt each other, you could be responsible for not supervising and not watching that. You have to document. A lot of times parents are upset if their kids have a bite mark or an unexplained bruise. They want to know how it happened. And so if you're busy doing paperwork or you're not in the classroom and you didn't see what happened, and whoever was there, they want to know, they want an answer. So it makes it hard, it makes it frustrating. So a lot of times you don't see people really wanting to rush into that type of career field like they did in the 90s. And so now you have people that are into doing things that are, like having their own business or going into something where it doesn't involve working with children. And this theory that these two women, Margie Carter and Debbie Curtis, created, called creative curriculum, has been scrutinized often more times because, like I said, going back to the classroom, when the kids explore the classroom, basically what I've heard people say, teachers have said, all the kids do is play. They play, 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 play. And then by the time they get the age where they're supposed to be 30 months and above and go to Head Start, the kids, you want them to have a little more structure. They're not used to structure because they've been used to playing all day. And there wasn't any structure. And some people feel like there should have been some structure early on so that when they move up, they're used to that because they've worked on it or they've had more time, to work on it. So they have it where the kids basically can do what they want with this creative curriculum and explore the classroom, which really is honestly playing. They can play in the block area. They can play in the house area. They can play with Play-Doh. They can play with toys. They can run around. They can listen to music and dance. And they can play, 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 play. And then by the time they get an age where they're supposed to be in a structure, more structure, where they have to have what is called a circle time, where you sit and listen to a story, they're not able to sit and listen to a story because what they've been able to do is go to areas and play all day. They don't have the patience to sit and listen to a story. And so kids who are able to listen to a story, they have parents, you can tell the difference. You can tell when parents are reading stories or reading books, showing numbers to their kids, the alphabets to their kids, talking to their kids, communicating with their kids, versus a kid who doesn't get no instruction on how to, sit and listen to a little storybook, sit for like 5 minutes to start with, and add a few minutes onto it until they are able to sit at least a good 10 minutes. You can't get kids to do any of that if all they are used to doing is running around and playing. And so that's what I've noticed, that many teachers have gotten frustrated because once they get to the classrooms where they're supposed to be more attentive and listening to structured material, they're not able to achieve that. And it's harder when you have a group of kids who maybe they're able to do, and you have one or two who they want to just play all day. That's because that's what creative curriculum started, is play all day. And now you expect them when they get a certain age, because you think normally that all kids mature the same, is what it sounds like, which they don't. Or depending on their situation, that they're able to sit and listen to a story, and not all the kids are able to sit and listen to the story. Not all kids are able to have that gradual structure being implemented to where they're going to just, now they're used to the structure. No, it doesn't work like that for all the kids. And if you start them off with play, let's play here, let's play there, they expect that all throughout. And so that's why you have some kids that it's harder for them to sit down and listen to a story. It's harder for them. There could be other things going on as well that make that a reason why it's harder for the kid to sit and listen to a story. If that kid has some kind of disabilities, it could be ADHD, or they could be autistic, or they might have some other things going on. They do have, in those schools where you're supposed to look at kids to see, if they have to have services. So they have implemented sort of like services where people will come and work with kids who have autism, or they'll work with kids who have some type of ADHD, or whatever their problem that they may have clinically diagnosed. But still, it's hard because in the preschool setting, they don't have, people who are one-on-one, people that just work specifically with those children, because you have a classroom of other kids that have needs and you have to pay attention to. And so that's what makes it hard with this creative curriculum. I don't think that they really thought it out as well. And I might be the first to say this. And the other problem I'm having with this is that when these two women did this, what I'm noticing now, I know that people are going to say, oh, this is going to point around. I feel like it should, though, because there's a lot of talk about the different cultures, multicultural learning, and things like that. But a lot of this seems like these two women here are focused on children that may be from a different social class, or a different group, or a different atmosphere, where maybe it might have been more easier to implement what they created as a theory of a creative curriculum. And they have all these books and all this expertise. But, what about other people who have their philosophies that could be just as good and work maybe for other groups of children? Some things seem sort of unrealistic if you have people that come from different backgrounds and they are not aware of what other kids are experiencing, because they come from a different either economic class of people, social class, or ethnicity, or cultural ethnicity. They might be from a different background while things are altogether different. What their experiences and what they've seen at home and their environments are altogether different. So it may even affect how they learn in that classroom. It's like throw away everything that you see every day and then come in the classroom and act like a little angel. That's not going to happen with all the kids. And so that's another thing that I thought I would bring up, because what someone is doing in the Midwest may not be what they're doing in the city of New York or in the city of LA. And what somebody is doing in the South with kids may not be what somebody is doing in, uh, you know, Detroit, or, maybe Seattle. It may be different settings, different background, different culture of what kids see or are exposed to. So, I would think probably more in rural areas, kids are more exposed to maybe more, I'm assuming maybe more farm animals. Here in the city, kids are exposed to, what do you think, maybe more cars, trains, buses, people rushing around. Everything is fast paced. And then, crime, or neighborhoods that have crime, so they might be exposed to a whole nother. And I'm not saying everybody lives in a neighborhood of crime, but they may be exposed to some of that. It's a possibility. A city life is different than the country life, or than other places. And so I know that some of their books may reflect that, but I feel as though a lot of times, honestly, that people that write these books don't really have to be in the classroom all day, every day, and rely on that as their only sole income. When people are in the office, or they're writing books, or they have all this notoriety, they're living a different life. And so they don't have to experience all the turmoil or the troubles, or the some of the hang-ups that some of these teachers today have gone through, or are going through currently. So it's easy to look like everything is easy when you write words and you write books about how to implement certain things in a classroom, but you're actually not in that classroom, and you're actually not having to be the teacher that has to turn in these papers, and you are actually not having to worry about your income being less than, so that you live paycheck to paychecks, because you're writing a lot of books and making a lot of money, and you're making a lot of income, and your life is different than somebody that is just trying to live and then trying to have a career at the same time, but they feel underappreciated. So I felt like I was going to do this video for the sole purpose of people who work in the preschool setting, because I don't think enough is said about preschool and people that are in that profession. We've heard things about LAUSD, we've heard things about PUSD, we've heard things about some of the schools all around in states of the USA, teachers who have had walkouts, and who have been, made to feel as though that they're underappreciated. But what about the preschool teachers that work in these classrooms, and then they have all of these kids that they have to account for, and all this paperwork? And it used to be you didn't even have to have, there was a time you didn't have to have all of this AA degree in child development, and BA, and now they require more education, but you get less pay. And there's a lot more requirements to work in these classrooms, and you get less pay. And I think the reason why there's less pay is because a lot of these schools are operating on a limited budget. And then some of that is not necessarily just the limited budget. A lot of times they don't want to pay the preschool teachers anymore, because the people that are in the office, they make the most of the money. And so that would mean that they would have to take a cut, possibly, in order to balance a budget out, if that's what they're working on is a budget. And so it just seems unfair, because you have these people that come from this organization that come to monitor the classrooms, and they could be looking at, you don't know what. They could be looking at the water, is it clean, the structure of the building, on the safety of the kids, um, is the staff, cleared and qualified to be in the classroom. There's different people that will come and monitor the classrooms. But, the problem is a lot of these classrooms are operating on next to nothing when it comes to staff, because a lot of people have been turned off by this career. It isn't made to feel like a career. It's made to feel like you are underappreciated and overworked and underpaid. And so here it's talking about Margie Carter and Deb Curtis. Says that this was back in 2012. It says that this two are the dynamic partnership behind many of your favorite books, right? They're designed for living and learning, and the Visionary Director's second edition. For more than 20 years, Deb and Marjorie have been inspiring early childhood professionals around the world together. So they designed and taught college courses, worked side by side with classroom teachers, produced professional development videos, and presented at conferences, consulted at centers, co-authored 7 books, and read on to learn about their writing process and why they think observing children is such a unique and powerful teaching tool, and what they hope you'll take away from their latest book. You hear that? So I wanted you to see that, because it seems like these women are successful. They may have a lot of insight, but yet they're not actually doing a classroom job where they're working with little kids every day, wiping noses and having to be in that room and getting that little bit of pay, and then having to turn in paperwork and meeting deadlines. There might have been a time where these women were in classrooms, but something somewhere they got together and they created a gold mine with all these books and all this philosophy and this creative curriculum theory that they have. And it has pretty much put them in a position where they don't have to be in the classroom. And you heard a little background of them. I'm sure there's more to them than just that. But what I'm saying is it's not all fun and rosy and a bowl of cherries for a lot of people in these preschool settings. They're not getting paid what they're worth. They're having to go back to school to get units. It used to be, when I started noticing that that field was even a thing, you needed only 6 units in the beginning. You needed 6 units, and you just needed a little bit of units, and you get your TB shot. I believe you get CPR, and you didn't need much more than that, and you were in the classroom. But then they had this thing called, and I don't know if any of you are familiar with this, it was called No Child Left Behind. When they implemented this concept, a lot of people who had the 6 units, or they had a little bit of here, a little bit of there. I don't know if it's looking for that. So a lot of these people had to go back to school, or they had to just drop the field altogether if they didn't have what was needed to meet the requirements of NCLB, which is an abbreviation of No Child Left Behind. It's an act that started in 2001. It was a U.S. act of Congress that reauthorized the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. It included Title I provisions applying to disadvantaged students. It supported standards-based education reform based on the premise that setting high standards in classrooms. And so when that happened, it changed a lot of what was to be, in these classrooms. You can read about it, but it also, I believe, even though it wasn't secondary school, it was preschool, it changed the rules of that. When one thing changes, everything changes. And I believe that's when it seemed like every year they started requiring more units of the preschool teachers. They started requiring that you have your permit. Your permit had to be up to date, and you had to have a certain number of units to work in the classrooms. You had to have certain particular types of units. It just seemed like it was more and more, it was starting to get more and more complicated. And let's say somebody that's already gotten their associate's or bachelor's degrees, if they're telling you to add more classes on to what you've already achieved over a period of years, it just seems like it's more taxing. So this is what was happening, and this is what's still happening, and this is what's turn off. A lot of these teachers have, kind of like taken a back seat to all of this and said, this is not the thing that I want to continue doing. Also, you realize that your temperament changes as you age. There's certain things you're not able to do. When you're working in a preschool setting, you're having to get down low, you're having to sit in low chairs, low seating, you're having to stoop and bend, you're also having to pick up kids, and some of those kids are heavy. Some of them weigh more than 50 pounds, 40, 50 pounds, and you're having to lift them on changing tables. Trust me, you don't want to do that. It's like picking up, like you got like heavy books, and they're piled up high, and you're having to hoist that up on top of something. And so it's like you could put your back out, you could fall and injure yourself, you could, have slip and falls in the classroom because there's toys everywhere. So there's a lot of hazards, and not to mention kids coming sick with things the parents won't tell you what it is because they tried to push them in the classroom, even though they know that whatever it is could be contagious. These are the type of things that people have noticed over the years. They pay close attention to it, so it's not as desired a feel as it once was. And so, with that being said, these are the two authors here, Margie Carter and Debbie Curtis, with this creative curriculum. I don't think they really realized where this was headed and where it's leading. It seems as though it has a shelf life working in a preschool setting. If you're young and you're, thriving, you're starting out, it may seem like cool in the beginning, or you've made some kind of mark of, wow, I'm going to do this. But as time goes by and you start getting older, the stooping, the bending, crouching down in the low chairs, and having to, also another thing that I don't think that people mention often is when you get older, your metabolism changes, your body changes, you may even have experienced health issues. So a lot of times with these creative classrooms and these schools, sometimes they want you to sit in a family style setting and eat the same school food that the kids are eating. And so if you have diabetes, if you have health issues where you can't really be eating this food, they want you to eat this food and model for the kids. You're eating food that is harmful to yourself as an instructor. In the classroom, you're telling kids how to eat healthy, but now you're eating something that isn't healthy for your body. You may not even be able to remain in the classroom because now your high blood pressure, your diabetes, whatever, you might have a spike. where now you're not in the classroom, you're hospitalized because you've been eating all these foods that have all this stuff that you're not supposed to eat. I don't think they really have worked out all of the things that happen in these classrooms. A lot of it sometimes seems unfair um, to the teachers, is what I'm talking about. And so maybe in the near future they will find another way to work around this, or they will add other different models of curriculum other than the creative theory that may be more beneficial. But for one, all that paperwork in the schools just to account for where the money is going, that's just ridiculous. As soon as Bobby walks, write that down. As soon as Bobby sits down, write that down. As soon as Bobby talks to Susie, write that down. As soon as Bobby goes to the bathroom, write that down. As soon as, after a while, you start to think this is not the place for me. And that's what a lot of these young people, when they start off young and they've been in it and they've been in it a while and they get older, they start thinking this is not the place for me. I've done this for X amount of years and I'm ready to move into a different profession. If you've had that career for so long, it's hard to transition to something else because now it's like starting all over again. And if all you've been used to is working in a classroom, but trust me, there are other professions you can go into where you start off making a lot more money and you're not working in a classroom and filling out a bunch of paperwork and being underappreciated. Having said that, I'm going to let this video go. So I don't know if other preschool teachers or instructors, what they feel about this, but I have heard some other people complain about this curriculum, that it's not as beneficial as people would think it is. It seems like every year they add on something new to it. And the other thing I wanted to mention is all these different teaching theories and strategies are expensive. All these books that they order are expensive. Think of all the money they could save if they didn't order all of these books. And if they just implemented classroom, just the basic classroom materials, and they had a different style of working this whole thing out, because I feel like it has not really worked. It has actually turned people away. They've lost a lot of teachers over the years. I don't think people are talking about it. A lot of teachers have left because they're tired and they're underpaid and overworked. A lot of teachers have given up on this. And for the ones that have stayed, they're not happy. You go into the classroom, they're not happy, they don't smile, they don't like being there. They're just there now trying to get a paycheck because they're trying to pay a bill. And they don't really enjoy what they do because they find it to be, daunting and a dead end. It's now being looked at as a dead end career. But I'm going to let this go. Thanks for listening.